Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Reinsurance Podcast. I am your co-host, Jared Lee.
And I'm Ben Rose. Good to see you all.
And you. Well, you said all, so it includes not just me, but listeners
I was
as
talking
well.
to our listeners.
Oh,
Sorry.
I thought it was me.
No, good to see
Just the emotional buildup of excitement of, and then just the crushing defeat when I realized that your acknowledgement of joy was not directed to me in any way at all.
No, but I accept responsibility because the ambiguity was clear. I cannot actually see any of our viewers, though they can see us.
But it was this...
Certainly not in real time.
It was good to see you all. It was like the sort of delayed, it was the ellipses that just drifted.
Greetings all. Yeah, no, exactly. You needed it.
But today we are doing a Ask Us Anything, the plural version of an AMA.
Number 3, I believe. In
I
fact,
think so.
I think you missed the last one, so I got put on the spot. We did an on the road.
Oh, yes, right.
And yeah, I had to sort of answer questions on your behalf, like where do you get your fashion sense and all this sort of thing.
Where is this jumper from, especially? Yeah.
Who's your biggest role model?
Yeah.
All that sort of thing.
All the hard-hitting questions.
I hope I gave the right answers.
I mean,
I might have.
People demand.
Yeah.
But we will kick this episode off. We've got these feeding in from Cordy. Much like every episode, we don't have any idea which these questions are going to be, so we're going to be winging it.
Yeah.
So popcorn at the ready. Here we go. From Nicola. There's been a big push for automation/digitization of underwriter workflow. What does this provide opportunities for the future of the industry?
Good question. I think the word that has been used very frequently in this space is workbench, and that type of tool, right, where everybody imagines what they would like their day to look like as an underwriter, and you picture there's a place I go where all my data comes in. I can see all my portfolio, and I can get straight on with like, which risks am I working on, and which stage are they at, and so on. Yeah. And that's the sort of imagined alternative to the current scenario of an inbox overflowing with a mixture of deals and internal stuff and all sorts of other things. Data at various stages hidden in FTP sites and beyond, and trying to pull data out of Excel spreadsheets to put it into another spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I think the reason we look for a bit of automation is structure there in terms of the underwriter experience, because it does feel like a overflowing kind of fountain of information that you're trying to structure and stay on top of within the bounds of an inbox and a spreadsheet tracker.
Yeah. Well, and I think you see these tools emerging kind of in all of our areas of our lives now. And I think if you've worked in the industry and you've experienced renewal seasons, it feels shambolic at times because there's so many deals happening. There's so many responses coming through. You're trying to manage communication through email from all these different parties and trying to get, update on the data you're working on, but not knowing if the attachment in this email you've just opened is the most recent version of that. And it lends itself very nicely to at least this dream of going, wouldn't it be nice if I could see all the deals and I'd know what I was missing or what I wanted to do next and have that control of the day in many ways. I think we're certainly working towards that, and I think we're doing a lot of things in the right way now to deliver those things, and I think you'll see more of that in future, but it's very much the result of the way it currently works, the number of deals that are going through. There's also this process of switching costs, this pain of switching costs perhaps, that if you're diving into this one account and all the data that you're having there, and you find a question you want to ask, so you go back on that one question, the disruption there that's now happened where that might be on pause and because other ones you're going to try to jump into, that's quite mentally fatiguing. And I think there's this ambition to allow people to know when a deal is ready for them to work on, spend all their energy on doing that, have sort of focused time there to finish a thing and then move on to the next thing. All of these things are sort of driving that ambition, isn't it?
You've got a reduction in both distraction and also boring janitorial work that you didn't want to do in the first place. So how do you automate getting everything to where it needs to be, but also getting there in the state it needs to be in? So ideally, clean data in an organized fashion versus the current data somewhere, somewhen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Next questions come through. Why are Ceded re-teams so busy in the lead up to 1/1? Why does data prep sometimes start in May?
Good question. It's funny, isn't it? Because you almost have a restaurant-like structure, right? Where it's like, right, we've got 100 guests coming for a giant banquet on the 1st of January, and everything needs to be ready and hot on that day. But in order to get everything ready, we have to start cooking everything in this very particular order to make sure it's ready. But equally, some of the ingredients won't be fresh and have to be, picked or grown at a late enough date that they're still fresh by the time of the dinner. So you end up with this very amusingly scheduled and structured set of work that needs to be done in this quite particular order. So we can take the June data cut that comes from IT as the most recent one, because otherwise, if we took the October one, it would be too late and we wouldn't have time to sort it out for this aspect, and then this August cut from this claim system and so on. And so it becomes a sort of scheduling nightmare to make sure you're working with something as late as possible to give the best data you can to your brokers and your reinsurers, but equally making sure you've got enough time to then get you through to the renewal date.
Yeah. The restaurant analogy, not even doing an analogy battle on this episode, but it's a good one, because it also lends itself to this idea that there's some element of an assembly line or some element of people who will do something next, right? So if your task is to prepare this dish, but the vegetables you got haven't been cleaned or similar, like your task is now delayed. And if we're trying to get everything served at this one point, so it's the same thing in our industry where it's not just the data that's going out, but it's this recognition that the recipients of that data need sufficient time to ingest it and understand it in order to return the sort of most accurate pricing for them. And some clients go out really, really late. Like I know some markets, there's some Asian markets specifically that I have familiarity with, but we'll send data and firm order terms out in like the last week of December. It's just not very much time for the reinsurers to turn around really insightful pricing on those. And the result is they just sort of kind of increase sort of arbitrarily in many ways of what they think that price might look like or similar, but it's certainly not the best way for that client to do that. But the friction points, so the more sophisticated clients will certainly have where it's like, we do this early so we can have enough time to do our work, and then for the next people in the chain to do their work.
I think that's a good way of thinking about it, right? You have each of those other players who's depending on you, the Ceded Re team, to provide them with the ingredients. I guess it's like for me to cook the carrots, you, the Ceded Re team, needs to have chopped them or grown them. Maybe it's a better one, and the brokers are going to chop the carrots for you. And then give them to the chef, who's actually then going to cook and glaze the carrots and then be able to serve them in time.
It's almost lunchtime here, so I'm getting very hungry.
The carrots have only been delivered to us on the 31st of December. There's no way we'll have them chopped and glazed.
Do carrots get al dente if they're cooked, or is that only a pasta term?
As if they're undercooked. I guess you could have them a bit raw, I suppose. Crunchy.
We should bring in a chef for one of the guests on the podcast. Teach us about it.
And any reinsurance professionals with a particular culinary enthusiasm?
I bet there is. I guarantee there is,
because we have secretly an amazing chef.
Because you have like Vicky Carter, who does like a bunch of design stuff and is actually incredibly good. Russell Higginbotham does a bunch of like artwork and woodwork and things. Like, we have a very diverse, skilled industry. I bet we can.
Somebody is
we'll set Cordy on it. Cordy will find us one.
MasterChef winner or Bake Off champion or something.
If there's someone in reinsurance who's competed in the Great British Bake Off, or the American version, the Great British Baking Show.
Is it called the Great British
Baking Show? It just doesn't flow off the tongue, does it?
But why is it called? Is it not the Great American Baking Show?
Because it's the UK show that they just rename for the American audience.
Oh, so it's just a replay of.
It's a replay but with a new name.
Because the American
new, very hard to pronounce.
The American ones are brilliant as well, though, right?
It's very dramatic.
Yeah. It's like so. The British one is like, okay, everybody, here's your recipe. Now make ready, go, bake, or whatever it is that they say. And the American one is like, right, everybody's standing behind this line. Your ingredients are on the other side of the room over there. And it's like a free-for-all, grab the spoon that you need to cook with. There's only 6 eggs and there's 12 of you, and the recipe requires 4 eggs, so fight to the death to get the ingredients you need.
They present over a trapdoor above shark-filled water.
Yeah. It's very entertaining. But a bit more.
Much more stressful for the contestant, I'm sure. All right, back to the Ask Us Anything.
Oh yeah, we're doing a podcast.
What should an early career data analyst be doing in insurance in terms of career progression?
Ooh, interesting question. You've got. I don't think that I can give a definitive answer to that, because obviously it depends on what you want to do and where you want to go with your career. I would say the more context, the better, right? So the most effective and kind of ultimately influential voices within our industry are those who understand both domains, or ideally even more domains. Yeah. So if you can speak to both what the data says and what it's actually like getting a deal done, that's when you become, dangerous enough in both fronts to be able to be useful. So you can go into a conversation with a client and understand what they're actually trying to achieve with a deal, but also understand what the data is telling you about their portfolio or the options available in a market. I think getting that hybridity of not just being, a data person who's good with, Excel or R or Python or something like that, and not just being somebody who's a relationships person who's really matey with, the clients. If you can bring both of those skills, even better if you can add a bit of actuarial training or similar, then you become indispensable. I mean, similarly, you get people who've done CFA type things and, understand, actually, how are we achieving the best, best capital adequacy ratio and all this sort of thing, that goes beyond the value that most generic practitioners would be able to provide. Yeah. So as many strings to your bow as you can get.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think if you come in from like a computer science background and you're a data scientist coming into this industry, getting as close to the deals as you can will be super insightful for how it actually works. It'll give you a far better understanding of what you're trying to solve for. So instead of being, the recipient of requests and go, tell me what this looks like, etc., you'll be able to understand the problem as the client articulates it. Trying to get into the room where those conversations are happening, where the deals are getting done, will just be immensely valuable. And then, as you said, it's one additional quiver to your.
And I would say vice versa as well. I mean, it's weird to say if you're already close to the deal, get away from the deal. But I think it is important because, at some point, if another competing provider of, broking or underwriting or whichever is available that has a much more technically proficient offering or is able to do something that you can't do, your ability to say, oh, but we're really good friends, or I know you really well, or I know your business really, really well, only goes so far. Yeah. You need to be able to play on the analytical and technical front as well. You've got to have some content.
Yeah, definitely agree. Specifically for Ben, once again, my feelings are hurt again. This has been emotionally destructive as an episode. For Ben specifically, Jared, shut up. During your time as an underwriter, what did the ideal Cedent look like to you? Ooh. Did you have a favorite child? He's good at sports.
I think it's. I mean, okay. There's a lot of familiarity with the Cedents in general, in that you don't see many surprise Cedents. So, in all cases, every Cedent that comes through has a bit of a reputation already. So, every Cedent is taken with a pinch of salt, and with their proposal, their narrative, their submission pack comes in, and everybody's got something to say. Oh, that's such and such. Their nickname is such and such because they always, etc. And the way that's built that reputation takes a long time because you're in the market a long time. But it is often based on quite small things that you might do. And probably the thing that made the difference between attractive cedents and unattractive cedents was like consistency, authenticity, and self-awareness in some ways. So regardless of what you did, I remember some of the cedents we really respected and always wanted to work with were like, they knew their business, they knew what they did, they were able to communicate what that meant for us and for them in terms of, underwriting risks and opportunities, and to do so convincingly. And then they were able to tell a story that actually, with the brokers, supported that truth in a way. I think the ones that, by contrast, became kind of laughable and that you didn't really take seriously or were kind of hesitant to get overly involved with were the ones where like they had a narrative that was completely misaligned to the data that they provided or the pack that they provided. And it felt like they were living in cloud cuckoo land in terms of, here's some data that we scrabbled together, but we really are the best. We really are great, and look at our team and such and such. Oh, they're a great underwriter, so you'll be in safe hands, you'll be fine. But not really any kind of substance. Whereas those who were able to successfully differentiate what they did and explain, this is the type of risk we focus on, this is our thesis, here's the data showing where we focused on the thing we say we focus on. Saying what you do and doing what you say, that double evidencing, really, really powerful, and helping avoid any cedent becoming sort of this victim of broad assumptions about the market. It's like, oh, you've probably been hit by this trend, haven't you? If a cedent can put in front of you an exhibit or similarly that says, we're different, we're special because we only focus on buildings of this type, or we only focus on risks below these bands or otherwise, and here's the bands to show it. Look at this. That's convincing.
Being evidence-led. I think there's a similar thing that happens on the broking side a little bit. That self-awareness piece is exactly right, where there are clients who, with what the market's doing and what the data says, like the brokers have a very good sense as to what the price might look like, or the desk quoting of that price. And the clients who come in and go, well, we want the price to be this. And they go to the market and press on this, but the broker's like, no, the market's not going to take that price. But the client's sort of a bit stubborn. They're like, well, we can go and talk to all the markets and press for that, but like, so you do have that happen. It's like it's an exercise that and
did you have a dream or nightmare client similarly, that kind of profile?
The quality of clients from a broker side certainly come down to the quality of data that they have and the speed by which you can get up to scratch on it. I remember starting my career with Japanese clients. Are very, very good clients. They produce really high quality data that doesn't require a lot of like rework and things, and they're very quick into the market. They're very clear about what they're doing. They're very efficient in many ways. And when I started doing some work in other regions and geographies, you certainly saw where like if you sum the premiums in a band and divide by the policies in the band, that number wasn't in the, like these sorts of things. You're like, wait, how is that? Oh, it's just fundamentally wrong at what they've sent us. But I wasn't used to that being a thing that could happen, right? So there is certainly certain geographies and markets, and I'm sure there's some brokers who listen to the podcast who absolutely only deal with clients who are like quite frustrating a lot of times.
I think we talk about brokers having the opportunity to be creative, and brokers having to be creative. One is a good scenario, and one is a less good scenario, right?
So those ones can be quite frustrating, or they'll ask for little things which are just huge amounts of work, but they don't really care. Like they're just very demanding for stuff like that, which you just get on with because they're the people who pay you. But those things are tough.
Next question.
In an industry that's so relationship driven, why does having good data matter? If the relationship's been established for several years, what's the incentive producing more accurate information?
I think a solid fundamental of data can be the basis of a strong relationship in many ways. It's part of the trust. Right? If you, no matter how much you've got a trusting relationship with an underwriter, they are still always going to look at the data because that's their job, their value add, right? So if the underwriter starts to see a discrepancy between what you're telling them and what the data says, regardless of your relationship, that's going to erode the trust between you.
Yep.
So I see it as a cornerstone, really, the data matching up to what you say, as we sort of mentioned earlier, a cornerstone of a trusting relationship.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a recognition that the industry is evolving, and if you're partners in this, you need to evolve with what those expectations are. Similar to like banking, where you may have businesses from a long time ago would have had a great reputation with like their lenders, but like, I'm good for it. Doesn't work anymore. Like, even though they've never defaulted on a loan in the last 40 years, doesn't mean the bank should just give them millions and more loans because they're good for it. Like, they will still say, well, we trust you. We've had this very good relationship to both of us for the last, generation. But here's what we need to be able to do this the best, terms for you. And I think it's a recognition that underwriters are expecting more, and the relationship is evolving, and the really committed partners to those relationships are doing what's best for that, which is now evidencing and providing higher quality, more granular, clearer data.
And I think especially now we're seeing that come to the fore in a hard market. Right? For a very long time. Yeah, you kind of could be like, underwriters, you don't have much choice. You've got to get some business in. You're fighting for a bite at the apple because there's so much capital out there wanting to get on our deals. That can change so quickly.
Yeah.
And you're going to be left high and dry if you haven't, got a way of proving that you're still a good risk.
Yeah.
Or at least a calculable risk when the market turns. Otherwise, the pricing loads you'll get hit with because the underwriter can. Will definitely come back and bite you, and they'll use the relationship against you and be like, well, come on, we're good friends. You can take it. Take it for me. My turn to get paid.
Very last question. Can you share any creative deal structures that you've seen that tackle unique risks?
So let me have a think.
I'll jump into one as you think through. There was sort of the introduction of new sort of tower types, right? So you look at things like cascading or top and drop sort of structures, these things that began to emerge. Again, very much looking at what the client, usually in traditional business classes like property or similar, but you have it where you're trying to tackle a very specific client challenge of, it's unlikely that this thing happens, but if it does, we want to be able to optimize how this program works. And you began to look at going, it doesn't just have to be the fundamentals of, is it an excess of loss or is it a quota share? There's ways for us to manipulate the structure to behave in second or third events in certain ways, and to move capital players who prefer to be on the top, but if the premium was a bit better, would come down in a second event. And you begin to lean into the appetites and interests for the reinsurers, the capital, the demands and the objectives of the clients, and then trying to find creative ways to go, if we did that, it actually reduces the overall premium of this structure, but it gives this client this additional thing. The reinsurer is happy with it because they're getting a bit more for the layer that they don't normally touch, but a little bit more exposure in this scenario, which they don't think is sufficiently too risky. Like, so it's that kind of deconstructing, which I thought was a really interesting one that we'd seen over the last maybe 5-6 years ago.
No, that is a good one. So the one that came to mind for me was for retro specifically. So retro is quite challenging in general because if you think about, insurance, you've got some data there, reinsurance, you've got upper level, some high level data, right? And then retro, even higher level data about, the reinsurance, where you're really far removed from the original risk there. So it becomes quite difficult to know that you're hedging well and to price properly. So especially across some sort of whole account or sort of entity-wide or company-wide covers, they found other ways to hedge with some of the structures. So things like having various towers for different lines of business or portfolios or subsections or whichever, and then saying, we've got a cover that will trigger for any 2 of these 5 towers. So if you blow out casualty and motor, if you also blow out property as well, it's not covered. But you could also blow out property and motor, but casualty wouldn't be covered. But the way of hedging there is almost, we'll cover, going over the top at the agreed limits for any 3 of these 6
Yeah.
pillars, or any single one of these
Yeah.
4 portfolios you've got blowing up. It's interesting because it's sort of like turning your entire company's book into more of that portfolio view, a bit like going back to sort of more generic reinsurance deals, rather than going for your sort of treaty type excess of loss deals, more of like your any one risk,
Yeah.
that type of deal.
It reminds me a little bit of combined layers, which I think are really interesting, because you have it where here's a $20 million limit layer. For the property book, that sits in excess of $75 million. But for the casualty, it's over above $10 million. But the underwriters there are kind of going, the likelihood of both of those, the property going that much more and the casualty being a bit smaller, is equally likely for then this layer to exist. And it's really but again, it's starting with, what is the client trying to solve for? How do they make their premium dollar go as far as possible? And you get really creative ways that the brokers and the markets sort of help solve those client problems together.
I figured out what I was trying to remember.
What is it called?
Then it's almost like a per risk at the retro level, in a way where a risk is a whole portfolio.
Yeah.
Right. So like in the same way we'd explain per risk for like a treaty book is like, what if any one of those expensive cars or big houses goes? With a reinstatement, it's like, what if any one of your entire portfolios blows up? You know, upper level.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting. That's a great question to end on.
Yeah.
Well, keep them coming. Send them in to
episodes.
producer@thereinsurancepodcast.com.
Well remembered. Had to think about that.
I'm getting a thumbs up from Corey in the back, so I've done it correctly. But yeah, keep those, because we do sort of accumulate those and then bring them out when we do have these episodes. So
as close as we can get to live podcasting.
Yeah. Until the live podcast.
Indeed. Watch this space.
Yeah. Until next time, everyone. Thank you.